Is it true that genes with which we are born determine everything that we will do in our lives?
The simple answer is no, genes do not determine everything. While genetics influence traits like temperament and cognitive abilities, behaviour results from a complex interaction between genetics and environment known as the biopsychosocial model. Studies on heritability of antisocial behaviour estimate that genetics explain 40 to 50% of variance, but this does not imply genetic determinism. Environmental factors account for at least half of the variation. Moffat 2005 distinguishes between life course resistant offenders whose antisocial traits emerge early and remain stable, and adolescent limited offenders whose behaviours decline due to social influences. This distinction highlights that genetic predispositions interact with environmental conditions rather than dictating behaviour. Furthermore, genome-wide association studies refute the idea of a crime gene. Criminality is polygenic, meaning multiple genes interact with environmental factors. Caspi and colleagues 2002 found that individuals with the MAOL gene variant were only more likely to develop aggression if exposed to childhood maltreatment. However, subsequent research suggests that the effect may not be as strong as initially thought, indicating the need for caution in linking genes to behaviour. Beyond antisocial behaviour, genetics also interacts with environment and intelligence and life outcomes. Truckenheimer and colleagues 2003 found that genetics played a stronger role in privileged environments, whereas environmental factors dominated in disadvantaged settings. This suggests that genetic potential is contingent on external conditions. Additionally, epigenetic studies show that stressors like financial hardship can alter gene expression, increasing risk taking, but shared family environments can buffer genetic vulnerabilities. While genetics influence behaviour, they do not determine everything we do. The strongest evidence supports a gene-environment interaction model where environmental factors shape the expression of genetic predispositions. The idea that genes set the stage but environment determines the story is a useful metaphor, but it's important to recognise that even genetic influences depend on broader social and psychological and environmental contexts.
Are all people born with the warrior gene, or MAOA gene, going to be violent towards others at some point in their lives?
No, having the so-called warrior gene does not mean a person is destined for violence. This is a misrepresentation of genetic research. While the MAOA gene helps regulate neurotransmitters involved in impulse control and emotional regulation, its effects are not deterministic, but moderated by environmental factors. A landmark study by Caspi and colleagues 2002 found that individuals with MAOAL only exhibited increased aggression if they also experienced severe childhood maltreatment. However, those with the same genetic predisposition but raised in supportive environments did not develop violent tendencies. While widely cited, some follow-up research questions the strength of this effect, suggesting the broader psychosocial factors would be more predictive of violence than a single gene-environment interaction. Further studies reinforce this gene-environment interaction model. Pinion and colleagues 2014 examined Finnish violent offenders and found that while some had MAOL, most people with the gene were not violent, challenging the notion of a direct causal relationship. Additionally, neuroimaging studies conducted by Meir Lindberg and colleagues 2006 found that the MOAL carriers may have greater emotional reactivity to threat, but this only translates into aggression when paired with environmental stressors like abuse or social instability. Moreover, Cluckley and colleagues 2019 studied Syrian refugees and found that resilience and social support significantly reduces stress responses in MAOAL carriers, reinforcing that protective environments can buffer genetic risk. This suggests that social interventions and psychological resilience play a crucial role in shaping behavioural outcomes, even for those with biological vulnerabilities. The idea that a single gene determines violent behaviour is an example of genetic determinism, an outdated and oversimplified view. Not everyone with MAOL becomes violent, and not all violent people have MAOAL. Rather than dictating destiny, genes interact with environmental, social, and psychological influences to shape behaviour.
How much of offending behavior is caused by nature and how much by nurture?
The debate over whether a criminal behaviour is driven by biology or environment remains essential to forensic psychology. Modern research rejects genetic determinism, showing that crime results from an interaction between genetic predispositions and environmental influences. Studies on childhood adversity consistently show that abuse, neglect, and exposure to domestic violence significantly increase the risk of antisocial behaviour in adulthood. Neurodevelopmental research confirms that trauma can alter brain regions involved in impulse control and emotional regulation, particularly the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala. However, Verter 2012 challenges the idea that adversity inevitably leads to crime, arguing that protective factors such as education, stable relationships, and social interventions can reduce criminal risk. A real-world illustration of extreme childhood trauma influenced behaviour is of Beth Thomas. Due to severe neglect and sexual abuse, she displayed violent and remorseless behaviour as a young child, traits associated with early onset conduct disorder, a known risk factor to adult psychopathy. However, cases like hers also highlight how early intervention can reverse maladaptive behaviours, reinforcing the importance of environmental support. The Dundee and Longitude study provides strong evidence for early life adversity shaping criminal behaviour. However, individual differences in resilience explain why some people overcome these challenges while others persist in antisocial behaviour. This supports gene-environment interaction models where genetic predispositions may heighten risk but do not determine outcomes. Beyond individual cases, large-scale sociological research confirms the environmental influences on crime. Neighbourhood disadvantage, poverty and weak placing significantly increase criminal behaviour. Broken windows theory suggests that invisible signs of social disorder increase lawlessness in communities where rules seem unforced. However, critics argue that this theory may oversimplify crime prevention by focusing on aesthetics rather than deeper structural inequalities. Offending behaviour cannot be explained by nature or nurture alone. While genetic and neurobiological factors may create vulnerabilities, it is environmental influences that ultimately determine whether someone engages in crime. The strongest evidence supports a biopsychosocial approach, recognising that crime emerges from the interaction between biological predisposition, early life experiences, and social conditions.
What kind of life experiences make it more likely that somebody with an inherited propensity for addiction will become addicted to alcohol or drugs?
Addiction arises from a complex interaction between genetic predisposition and environmental factors. While some individuals have a biological vulnerability due to differences in the dopamine reward system, life experiences play a crucial role in determining who ultimately develops substance dependence. One of the strongest risk factors is childhood trauma, including abuse, neglect, and parental substance use. Research by Anda and colleagues 2006 shows that adverse childhood experiences strongly correlate with substance use disorders. Chronic stress during development can disrupt the hypothalamic pituitary-adrenal axis, increasing vulnerability to using substances as a coping mechanism. Additionally, epigenetic studies suggest that severe stress can alter gene expression, making addiction more likely in those with a genetic predisposition. However, some studies argue that the role of epigenetics in addiction remains complex and not fully understood, suggesting a need for further research. Beyond early trauma, peer influence and social environment significantly impact addiction risk. Adolescents with friends or family members who use substances are more likely to experiment with drugs or alcohol. This aligns with social learning theory, which suggests that people model behaviours they observe. However, not all individuals in high-risk peer environments develop addiction, suggesting that personal resilience and external support systems play a protective role. Socioeconomic stress, including poverty and lack of educational opportunities, further increase addiction risk. Individuals facing chronic financial instability or housing insecurity often turn to substances to cope. Neighbourhood disadvantage studies confirm that people in high crime, socially unstable areas with easy drug access are more likely to develop substance use disorders. However, critics argue that social environment alone does not fully explain addiction, as many individuals in disadvantaged settings do not become dependent, highlighting the role of personal coping mechanisms and mental health support. Individuals in high-stress environments such as military service or domestic violence survivors face higher addiction risks. Veterans with PTSD are particularly susceptible to alcohol and opioid addiction. Seal and colleagues 2011 linked combat exposure to higher substance use rates. Similarly, domestic violence survivors and individuals in high-pressure jobs may develop substance dependence as a coping mechanism. However, research also shows that early intervention, therapy and social support can reduce substance dependence in these high-risk populations. Addiction does not stem from a single factor, but from a cumulative interaction between genetic vulnerabilities and life experiences, reinforcing the gene-environment model, demonstrating that addiction is not inevitable, but rather shaped by complex interwoven life experiences.
If somebody is born with a genetic predisposition to break the law, what kind of things can be done to help them avoid getting involved in crime?
One of the most effective prevention strategies is early intervention, as the first 5 years of life are critical for brain development. Positive early experiences can override genetic risk factors for criminality. The Troubled Families Programme in the UK, launched in 2011, provides intensive support for families facing poverty, domestic violence and parental substance abuse. Research shows that unstable, high-stress households increase the risk of conduct disorder and antisocial behaviour. The TFP's family-focused intervention led to a 40% reduction in juvenile offending rates, demonstrating that targeted support can break cycles of criminality even in individuals with biological vulnerabilities. For children already shown antisocial traits, interventions such as functional family therapy, FFT, and multi-systemic therapy, MST, have proven effective. FFT provides intensive therapy for families with antisocial children, significantly reducing reoffending rates. MST targets parenting skills, school engagement, and peer influence to decrease youth aggression and crime. An example of successful intervention comes from Scotland's Violence Reduction Unit, VRU. In the early 2000s, Glasgow was the murder capital of Scotland, with the high levels of gang violence. Recognising that punitive measures alone were failing, Scotland implemented a public health approach to crime prevention, treating violence as a social and psychological issue rather than purely a criminal justice problem. The VRU focused on employment training, education, mentoring and trauma-informed counselling, leading to a 50% reduction in murder and a significant decline in violent crime. This demonstrates that providing structured alternatives can divert individuals away from crime, even in environments where violence was once the norm. Cognitive behavioural therapy, CBT, has been widely recognised as an effective intervention, particularly for those at risk of antisocial behaviour. CBT focuses on cognitive restructuring, impulse control, and emotional regulation, helping individuals develop pro-social thinking patterns and alternative coping mechanisms to avoid criminal behaviour. UK-based programmes such as Resolve have successfully used CBT techniques to reduce violent offending and reoffending rates. Environmental interventions, early childhood support, family therapy, and behavioural programmes can significantly reduce the risk of offending individuals with biological vulnerabilities. Success stories like Scotland's VRU and UK-based therapy programmes show that crime prevention is possible through structured intervention, rehabilitation, and support systems, reinforcing that genes are not destiny, behaviour is shaped by a dynamic interaction between biology and environment.